We all loved the Regency period. We were obsessed with the empire waist, the sharp snub, and the high stakes marriage market. But we are currently torn between two very different versions of this world. On one side, the psychological realism of Jane Austen, where a muddy hem is a moral catastrophe. On the other, the neon-soaked maximalist fever dream of Bridgerton, where a duke is a prize and the queen is a fashion icon. Hello, I am Dr. Amy Boyington, and today we are doing the unthinkable. We're putting Elizabeth Bennet and Daphne Bridgerton in the same room to see who actually had it better. To understand Elizabeth and Daphne, we have to look at their social weaponry. In the Regency era, a woman's power was almost entirely derivative. It came from her father, her husband, or her reputation. Elizabeth Bennet is a creature of weaponised wit. Living in the gentry class, the landowning but not titled class, she exists in the social middle ground. She is educated enough to realise the absurdity of her neighbours, but poor enough to be threatened by them. Her wit isn't just a personality trait, it's a survival mechanism. By laughing at the world, she exerts a control she doesn't actually possess over her legal or financial future. Daphne is a curated image. As a member of the peerage, the untouchable 1%, Daphne lives in a glass house. In the Bridgerton universe, the diamond isn't just the prettiest girl, she is a political asset. Daphne doesn't have the luxury of being sassy at a ball because her every blink is scrutinised by the Queen and documented by Lady Whistledown, as well as the Ton. Her silence, therefore, is her armour. If we want to understand the true limitations of these women, we have to look at the numbers. Basically, it's all about money. So for Elizabeth, her father, Mr. Bennet, has an income of £2,000 a year. In the 19th century, this made him a gentleman. He didn't work for a living, he collected rent from tenant farmers. This was enough to keep his 5 daughters in decent muslin, a carriage and a few servants. But here is the catch. Because his estate is entailed, meaning that £2,000 a year stays with the land. So when Mr. Bennet dies, that income goes to Mr. Collins. The Bennet girls are therefore left with the interest on their mother's small dowry, roughly £40 to £50 a year. That really is not much. It's basically the poverty line for a lady. Now, if we look at the Bridgertons, while their exact income isn't stated, a Viscount of Anthony Bridgerton's status would likely command £15,000 to £20,000 a year. This isn't just more money, it's a different sphere of wealth. The Bridgertons are part of that top 0.1%. They have old money that has accumulated for generations. This wealth buys them the London house, the debutante season, and the political influence to be friends with the Queen. For Daphne, money is an invisible force field. For Elizabeth, money is a shadow that follows her into every ballroom. Then there is the matter of the title. For the Bennets, they don't have a title. They are simply Mr. and Mrs. They are respectable, but they are lower gentry. In the eyes of the Ton, they are provincial nobodies. Whereas with the Bridgerton, they are part of the peerage. They hold a hereditary title of Viscount. This gives them a seat in the House of Lords and a permanent place in the elite of London society. So, having looked at the finances, we now need to look at what that actually means in terms of physical property. In the Regency era, land was the literal engine of your existence, but the scale of that land created entirely different realities. Elizabeth Bennet's home, Longbourn, is a working estate. It sits on approximately 500 to 800 acres of Hertfordshire countryside. In the 1810s, this was a respectable, solid holding for a member of the gentry. It provided enough income to keep the family in comfort. But comfort is not luxury. At Longbourn, the line between the big house and the farm is incredibly thin. The Bennets are intimately aware of the harvest, the weather, and the price of grain. And if a tenant farmer fails, the Bennets feel it in their dining room. Elizabeth's world is one of organic provincial stability, but it is a small world. Her estate, her life is part of a small village where everyone knows everybody's business. Now, look at the Bridgertons. While their London house is their stage, their ancestral country seat, likely Aubrey Hall, is a landed empire. A family of their rank and income would command an estate of about 10,000 to 20,000 acres. The Bridgertons don't just own one farm, they own dozens of farms. They own entire villages, they are the lords of the manor in the way the Bennets can't even fathom at this time. For Daphne, the estate isn't a place where you worry about the pigs or the chickens or the mud on your ham. It's a sovereign territory that funds a lifestyle of pure, uninterrupted luxury. She is so far removed from the working estate that she doesn't see the work of the land. She only sees the wealth that it produces. This now leads us to the biggest logistical divide, the London house. In Bridgerton, the social season revolves around the family's massive London house. In the Regency era, if you were serious about power, you moved your entire household to London from April to August. Owning a London townhouse was the ultimate flex. It meant you had double wealth, an estate in the country to provide income, and a mansion in the city to provide influence. The Bridgertons are part of the political class. They need to be in London because that's where Parliament sits and where the King breathes. The Bennets, however, are provincial gentry. They don't have a London house because, quite frankly, they can't afford one. Keeping a house in town required a separate staff, massive carriage fees, and a wardrobe that would bankrupt Mr. Bennet in a week. As a result, the Bennet sisters can only visit London if they have relatives or friends willing to host them. We see Jane Bennet doing this when she stays with her aunt and uncle when trying to catch a glimpse of Mr. Bingley. Moving on, we now need to talk about why Daphne Bridgerton is a diamond and Elizabeth Bennet is just Elizabeth. In the Bridgerton world, the girls are debutantes. This wasn't just a fancy word for a teenager. It was a formal, state-sanctioned transition into the marriage market. The presentation was a social blue tick. To be a debutante, a young woman had to be sponsored by a lady who had herself been presented. For the Bridgertons, this is their birthright. Their mother, Lady Violet, as a viscountess, is a permanent fixture of the inner circle. When the Queen nods at Daphne, she is essentially issuing a royal guarantee. This woman is of gentle birth, her reputation is spotless, and she is a viable vessel for a noble bloodline. But the Bennet sisters were never presented. And this wasn't just a matter of living in Hertfordshire. It was a failure of patronage. To get through the door of St. James's Palace, you needed a connected sponsor. Mrs. Bennet, the daughter of a country attorney, lacked the social standing to even walk through the gates, let alone sponsor 5 daughters. Mr. Bennet, while a gentleman, lacked the political ambition or the funds to hire a high-status relative to act as a proxy. This lack of presentation greatly limited the Bennet sisters' opportunity to find a suitable husband. They have to instead settle for local men known to the family or wait for a stranger to enter their local community. In the end, this is what we see happen to 3 of the 5 Bennet sisters. On the opposite side of the coin is the Bridgerton sisters, where elite men compete with one another to secure their hands in marriage. The Bridgerton name, their fortune and reputation is so well known that marriage is almost a guaranteed thing. While the financial and physical scale of their worlds were miles apart, Elizabeth Bennet and Daphne Bridgerton are bound by the same invisible ironclad laws. Regency etiquette. Whether in a gilded London ballroom or a drafty assembly room in Meryton, the social choreography was the primary language of power, and a single misstep could be a social death sentence. In both Pride and Prejudice and Bridgerton, the dance floor is the only place where a man and woman could speak somewhat privately. However, this freedom was strictly regulated. First of all, we have the introduction. In the Regency era, you could not simply walk up to someone and start a conversation. You had to be presented. So, for example, a gentleman could not ask a lady to dance unless they had been formally introduced by a mutual friend or by the Master of Ceremonies. For example, in Bridgerton, the Master of the Ceremonies is often Lady Danbury or even the Queen herself, making the introduction a high-stakes political endorsement. Rule number 2, the rule of the chaperone. A lady never attended a ball alone. She was always accompanied by a chaperone, usually a mother, an aunt, or a married sister. The chaperone's job was to ensure the lady was never alone. A lady could walk to the punch bowl with her dance partner, but she could never leave the main room. This is why the garden scenes in Bridgerton are so scandalous. To be alone in a dark garden with a man for even 5 minutes was a social execution. In Austen's world, even standing too long in a corner to whisper was enough to set the neighbourhood gossips on fire for a month. Rule number 3, the table of precedence. The ballroom had a literal order of operations. Before the music even started, the guests had to stand in a line based on their rank. A duchess always stood at the top of the dance line, followed by countesses, baronesses, and finally the daughters of gentlemen. Because Daphne is a diamond and a viscount's daughter, she is always at the head of the set. Elizabeth Bennet, however, is at the mercy of whoever else is in the room. If a baronet's daughter shows up to a Meryton ball, Elizabeth would be pushed further down the line. This mattered because the people at the top of the line got to call the dance, choosing the steps and the music. Rule number 4, the white glove mandate. You never under any circumstances touch skin to skin. Ladies wore elbow-length gloves for evening wear. Because of this rule, the act of a man helping a lady into a carriage or holding her hand during a ballroom dance was the only physical contact allowed. And even then, this is through a glove. This made the chemistry between Darcy and Elizabeth or Daphne and Simon feel incredibly charged. Every touch was filtered through layers of silk. While the rules were the same, the atmosphere of the balls seen in Pride and Prejudice and Bridgerton were very different. This highlighted the class divide between the provincial gentry and the London peerage. For Elizabeth, the ball at the Meryton Assembly Rooms was a public event. Because it was subscription-based, anyone who could afford the ticket and was considered a gentleman or a gentlewoman could attend. They were usually much less formal, louder, and more crowded. The floor was sometimes uneven, sometimes candles dripped wax everywhere, and the music was provided by a small local band. Here, the gentry mixed with tradespeople and military officers. The etiquette was slightly relaxed, but because the community was so small, the gossip was twice as lethal. Everyone knew who danced with whom, and the judgment was immediate. For Daphne, though, the balls that she attended were always private, invitation-only affairs held in massive London townhouses. The floors were chalked with elaborate designs to prevent slipping, the rooms were scented with expensive hothouse flowers, and the orchestras were world-class. This is where the elite came to play. There were no tradespeople here. The formality was stifling because the stakes were national, and in a private ball, you weren't just dancing for your neighbours, you were dancing for the approval of the ton, the collective weight of British society. But despite these differences in glitter, the consequence of a faux pas was the same for both women. If Daphne was caught in a compromising position in the London garden, she was ruined. If Elizabeth was seen being too forward with an officer in Meryton, her sister's marriage prospects vanished. Ultimately, the ballroom was a stage, a place where everyone was watching everyone else. It must have been exhausting. Whether the walls were covered in gold leaf or peeling wallpaper, the Regency heroine had to navigate the floor with the precision of a tightrope walker, knowing that the music was merely a backdrop to a very dangerous game of survival. To truly grasp the divide between Longbourn and Mayfair, we have to look at the sheer volume of these girls' wardrobes. In a world without fast fashion, every garment was a massive investment of time, labour and money. The Bennet sisters operated on a limited rotation system. For a family with an income of about $2,000 a year, a new silk gown or a muslin gown was a major event, often reserved for the most important balls of the year. A girl of Elizabeth's status likely owned 3 to 5 evening dresses at any given time. These were expected to last several years. Because they couldn't buy new dresses for every event, the Bennets mastered the art of the remake. Jane Austen's letters are filled with talk of retrimming hats or adding new lace to an old gown to make it appear fresh. So a dress would often start out as a best gown, then it would be downgraded to an everyday dress, and eventually it would be cut down for a younger sister or used as scrap fabric. Elizabeth's wardrobe was a cycle of maintenance. In contrast, Daphne lives in a world of opulence. For Daphne and her sisters, wearing the same gown to 2 major balls in the same season was a social faux pas that could be reported in the papers. A debutante in the ton required a staggering array of clothing. We aren't just talking about ball gowns here, we are also talking about morning dresses, carriage dresses, walking dresses, riding habits, opera cloaks, bonnets, hats, feathers, etc., etc. A single season could require 20 to 50 new ensembles. For Daphne, she is able to commission a brand new wardrobe every spring. The modiste would be kept on a retainer to ensure that Daphne's look was always current, incorporating the latest lace from Brussels or silk from India. She was rich enough to buy whatever she wanted. Though it may seem that Daphne has all the wealth and all the opportunities, in reality, though, this could be incredibly stifling. In the social hierarchy of 1813, freedom was inversely proportional to rank. Because Elizabeth Bennet was lower down the social ladder, she was granted a level of personal agency that Daphne Bridgerton could only dream of. As Elizabeth's family has no title and only a modest income, the bon ton doesn't care about who she marries, provided that he is a gentleman. This lack of security is her greatest asset in some ways. This brings Elizabeth some physical freedom. She can walk 3 miles through fields alone with a book in her hand. While this is seen as unladylike by the snobby Bingley sisters, it doesn't cause a national scandal. No one's going to write about it in the newspapers. Elizabeth can also reject a proposal from Mr. Collins, a man who would have secured her family's home, and while her mother screams, the world does not end. The bon ton does not care. Her freedom comes from her relative insignificance to the British Empire. She is allowed to have a personality because she isn't part of the political elite. She isn't part of a named family with a huge reputation to defend over time. Daphne Bridgerton, conversely, is an asset to her family. As the diamond of the first water, her every movement is an act scrutinised by the public. Daphne cannot walk to the end of the street without a groom, a lady's maid, or a brother. Her physical world is a series of gilded boxes, carriages, drawing rooms, and ballrooms. When Daphne considers a suitor, she isn't just thinking about her own heart, she's thinking about the Bridgerton name. If she makes a bad match, she devalues her sisters on the marriage market. Her compliance isn't a lack of character, it's a calculated sacrifice for the survival of her family's status. So for Elizabeth, a social mistake is a local gossip item that blows over in a week. But for Daphne, a mistake is a headline. There were lots of different types of circulars, newspapers, like Lady Whistledown, that would have commented on her every move. So who had it better? What is our verdict? Do you think that Elizabeth had it better, or did Daphne have it better? Was it better to have more money, or was it better to have more freedom? One has the freedom of the fields, the other has the power of the palace. We often envy the Bridgertons for their gowns and their dukes, but we forget the price of that glitter. Elizabeth Bennet might have a muddy hem and a precarious future, but she does own her own footsteps. In the Regency era, that was the rarest luxury of all. Today, we remain obsessed with these women because they represent two paths we still navigate today. Do we fight the system from the outside like a Bennet, or do we play the game so perfectly that we own the board like a Bridgerton? Whether you prefer the muted muslin or the sparkling tiara, the lesson is the same. In a world designed to value women as assets, your greatest rebellion is to remain the architect of your own story. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, but do let me know, would you prefer to be Daphne or would you prefer to be Elizabeth? If you've enjoyed this, please like, comment and subscribe. Thank you.